Bienvenidas to Merendiando, part of Radio Luna Theater. Today we are chatting with the duo behind Siranoush, director and co-creator Carla Melo,
and writer and performer Lara Arabian. We chatted with them about taking risks, the importance of representation in theater, and how was the process to create a multi-language, multimedia play. Let's get started!
Carla and Lara, we're so excited to have you. We both watched the piece at the Rutas Festival and it was beautiful. It was moving. It was everything you want to see after not being in live theater, coming back and being like, this is live theater, this is it. But it was not the first time I watched Siranoush personally. I had the opportunity to watch the 20-minute version at the Caminos in 2019. How has the development process been since? And did the tiny thing called global pandemic,
What? The what?
And did the global pandemic affect it or benefit the process?
First of all, as you reminded me earlier, we had the chance of applying for grants for a full production. We had a couple of workshops through the years. So this was our chance. So just really, I guess, distilling what really the production was about, who else we wanted to bring into the team for the full production. That's mostly what we used that time for.
Yeah, we didn't actively work on workshopping it or anything like that. I was very fortunate as an actor and writer to be working on different projects throughout the pandemic. So Siranoush was always kind of bubbling in the back, but it was never at the forefront. But I do think it allowed for some time for things to filter through. And definitely what you were saying, Monica, about like being with people at the end, like that when we came back to the room was one of the things that I kept talking about was the audience, which they were already present at that Caminos excerpt that you said, which was really more or less the first 20 minutes of the piece. And that was already a key component. But, when Aluna wrote to us and said, what theater space would you like to be in? The main space or the back space? And both of us, the studio space, and both of us said the studio space. This has to be a piece that's very intimate, that has to feel like the audience, they're the last character. You're the character that I'm interacting with, along with the lights and the videos, but you are my scene partners. And the element of surprise with the audience was really important to me. I didn't want to telegraph going in and being with them by having to go down a set of stairs each time. So that was something that became very clear to me. I think even more important with the time spent away from theater and being in the room.
Quickly, I second that because I spent the pandemic trying to devise a production with a large cast via Zoom. And I also brought Lara as a dramaturg to that. And so, just that change, just being in the room again, that was really, really inspiring.
I'm curious about your first meeting. Like when your first live meeting to restart the project, how was that? Like, how did it felt?
Surreal. I was like, we're doing this? Are we doing this? Are we? Because honestly, I have to say there was a part of me that just kept thinking that the rug was going to get pulled out from under us. The last second. I kind of refused to believe it. Maybe it was also because I was slightly terrified, but I kept thinking, is this going to really happen? Is this? Because we were supposed to do it in 2020, and then that got pushed to 2021, which at the time we're like, 2021, of course we'll be back. My gosh. And then that got pushed back. And I had been in spring of this year, I was in a production, and it was so hard with COVID. It was when numbers were coming back up, and to stay safe and to stay healthy. And our stage manager was going down and the actor was going, like, it was so chaotic. And I just kept thinking, it's in the fall. Schools are going to be back. What's going to happen? So there was a part of me that was a little frightened, but also so delighted to jump back in. I'd missed her. I'd missed Siranoush.
Yeah.
I really missed it. And then when I read it again, I thought, oh, I'm so happy I still really like it. I remember telling you that, Carla. I remember that. I like it. Yeah.
I think there's definitely like this in-person feeling is like no other. especially for a piece like this, like that you're saying, like we were your scene partner. We were very close physically and also throughout the whole performance. And also like each audience is different. Each night gives you a different feeling, different reactions. It's something I think priceless for a performer and in general for like a theater or any like live piece creator person.
I was so thrilled to have an audience. Because after doing it and doing runs or rehearsing with just Carla and our stage manager, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe Trevor would come, be in the back. It was so, I knew I wouldn't know the piece until I had people there. Like I'm not going to know what this is until there are people that I can interact with, and more than two people. And to have the people in the room not have seen it before or not have experienced it before, that was really key. But for sure, I was just dying for an audience.
Well, same for me. I mean, I'm the first audience member, but in the sense the audience provides that it just sort of reassures you that you're going in the right path and that things are making sense because you also get immersed, especially in this kind of piece, in this, one person show.
We did notice when we were in the show that there's a use of projections, of live streaming, basically. And as a creative team, when in the process of this like development process, did you started thinking about how do we want to tell this story and what mediums we want to use?
I think we began quite early on when we knew that we wanted to represent the many languages that Siranoush in order to really continue to work as an actress when her own language was banned. So we knew we wanted to use other languages, and thus we knew that the most obvious way to translate would be to use subtitles. Wanted those subtitles to be dynamic. I remember an early workshop, not that I took, but I learned about and saw a presentation that Trevor had with Aluna, part of a Caminos from a few years back. It was called like dynamic subtitling, and so I was really inspired by that. So anyhow, so it's part of it started with that, and then also just what Lara already mentioned, that or suggested that like in this one person show, you really need more. I mean, this happens in every theater, if it's good theater, in my view, but you really need to activate the scenic space and treat it as a co-scene partner, as another character, right? And I think video, it's one of the ways that can be done in an almost more, literal way, as when we used the projections to double her presence. And I think that came actually it was something we had thought before, like, and we never know who thought something first. Like, let's just say we thought before, but it really became more tangible during this process. And then, of course, collaborating with our projections designer, Avide Sadat Paju. What else? The live streaming was also, it came with this conversation with Avide. So first, the live streaming was simply had this function to magnify the action of the puppets, which were not actual puppets. They are traditional Armenian dolls. It was necessary to amplify them. And at the same time, I liked that it created kind of a split focus between seeing Lara puppeteering them and seeing them at the same time, so that it created this split focus. So I think that there was different layers of how we used the projections, but Lara can add to it because she played with them.
well, what I would say is that I think I don't come from a world where I think technology first. So for me, it's really the word. And so writing it, there was a piece, but I think what is, well, amongst many things, so fantastic about collaborating with Carla is I think we have different strengths when it comes to certain things. Because Carla, and I'm speaking for, but it comes more from like a graphic artist, video installation, installation art, that sort of a background. She was able to conceive of things that way that I hadn't necessarily. I knew that there would always be doubling. I knew that there would always be like and tripling and quadrupling. There's somehow we would need to represent those things, and that the dolls would be there. But in terms of the video, I think definitely it was Carla who was able to conceive it more in her, and then relay that to me, and then I would be able to kind of work around that or imagine that, and then obviously with Avide as well, and even in the Caminos presentation, we had another video collaborator, and Melissa Joachim, who's fantastic as well. It was how do we tell the story? Because in the end, it was not about like, let's do a cool effect. It was what is the story we want to tell, and how are all of these partners, scenic and the art, how are they also storytellers? We want everything on the stage to tell a story.
In that storytelling function, it also had some minor documentary moments where we share something of Lara, say a picture of her. So there was that use, and then there was also this need that came with working in the production when we finally began to understand this piece, which I mean, it's just such a rich piece of writing, but really that it sort of emerged in a kind of almost kaleidoscopic, fragmentary way. And so, as we try to put it together, as Lara also workshop the playwriting of it, it was all these pieces that were developed separately that then started to fall into place. And then we had the sort of what bookended the piece was this entrance into a kind of magical realist reality, or at least that's how I conceptualized it, and then the emerging out of it in a way that integrated that, and so then we used video in two moments to create a more immersive environment that conveyed that sense of that sense of magic of a space where you can interact with ancestral presences, and not necessarily blood ancestry, but how do we conceive of ancestry within a diasporic journey?
We were ambitious.
We were very
ambitious.
It was amazing. Also, something that for me that really stuck out it's the use of multiple languages. What is the dramaturgical process to know when to use which language? Like, how do you decide where everything goes?
I wish I had a really clever answer for you. Other than it was instinct, and also, well, part of it was what are the language, because there's two characters, right? There's Siranoush and then there's Lara. So for Siranoush, it was clear she can only speak the language. I mean, she never spoke English. I want to be clear, but and there it was channeling. But I was channeling her. But what did she perform in? So those languages had to have a clear boundary. These are the ones she did, either phonetically or she knew them. So with those languages, and then it became about, well, what do they convey? Like what text, what iconic pieces of text are there? Or how can we use the language, again, not just as a trick, but to convey something about the piece itself, whether it be about the Lady of the Camillos, which is about this prostitute, or about Medea and her children, and Joan of Arc, and the different roles of women that we need to, that get played. So each time the language was chosen on those ones very carefully in terms of how do they marry with the text from another play that is being given here. And then for Lara, it was about like I said, like I mentioned in the play, the way that I speak Armenian, which is mainly Armenian. It's mainly Armenian, but then there are these other words that snuck in there from other languages, from all of the migrations that my family has gone through. So we speak a certain sort of mix, and then now being in Canada as well, that adds to that mix. It's that classic, like in one sentence, there's 3 different languages when you're talking to your family, because we all, understand each other. So that was where that came from. And also just the constant investigation of where does this lie in the body. That was, I think, the very beginning, one of the guiding questions that we had that both Carla and I can really relate to as humans, but also as artists, body mapping and language mapping on the body. And, that is a very key thing that I still have no answers for, but that was one of the key curiosities that was driving the piece. What happens to the body when you start speaking another language? And where do all these other languages lie, and how do they get activated or lie dormant? So those were key questions that we kept coming back to.
And I just want to add that so we needed to represent her journey, not in a documentary sort of truthful way. So for instance, we knew that she spoke Farsi, and then we thought, oh, maybe we can put into the Joan of Arc story. So we weren't trying to sort of track in a sense of like a historical accuracy, but broadly, it was important to us to represent her, like, so it's almost like reconceptualizing what this sort of like loyalty to a historical like fact is, how to represent her, because in so many ways the piece was so much about the search for Siranoush, right? But then the other thing that we talked about too, about this use of multiple languages was to sort of just disturb the anglophone hegemony on stage, and to try and be as daring as we could, while still obviously positioning ourselves as say an English only speaking audience, and how they be able to navigate the piece. Obviously we wanted everybody to get the story, but we also thought that there were certain things that it was okay for monolinguals not to get, that those that there would be a variety, and that we had this audience that hadn't seen themselves on stage yet. So that was very important for us to sometimes choose not to translate, or to sort of just not do literal translations.
That's very true. Yeah. And what were the key things that an audience member could hold on to without understanding the full text? And also, there are chunks, like just on a purely practical, like getting people to read an entire paragraph was not going to engage them in any way. But what were the key points of the story? And absolutely what Carla is saying, there were a few times where I just kind of went, I just want this moment is for the Armenians. Like, for them to feel like they are seen, and for people who, like anglophones, to just for a moment feel displaced and a little disoriented. Right?
Yeah, no, I think as people that, we speak Spanglish, and I think there is something about like what feels right in your body connected to a language. I think for me it happens a lot, like certain things I learn in English, so it's easier for me to like explain it and like talk about them in English. And then my Spanish is now a mix. I'm from Peru, but a lot of the words that I say now are Mexican slang, just because I'm surrounded by Mexican people. Like the majority of my friends are Mexican, because like the Peruvian diaspora here is quite small. At least like the queer Peruvian diaspora, it's like a little bit harder to find. But also like my language, my Spanish language has changed and like adapted, because like I've learned new ways. But I think it makes a lot of sense also to try to be like, this is what feels right for me.
Yeah.
And I think even though like I didn't understand like certain parts of the play, it's still like a similar experience that I go through like on a daily basis. So I'm like, I'm also being like, yeah, you don't need to understand this. This is not for you. And that's okay. It's like not everything has to be for everyone. There's space within one play. Like this is like one performance, one play, and there's space for like multiple identities to feel identify with this.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was never an intention to lock anyone out, or to make anyone feel excluded, or even bad, like, you only speak English, what? There's none of that. But I think there was more the desire for recognition, and the desire to stake a claim on stage that I personally had not seen. And that felt very important, especially when we're talking about a language that has been threatened, and erasure and banning and all of that. So yeah, what you're saying is so interesting, because amongst all the Armenian diasporas in the world, that's what happens. So my cousins in Brazil, their Armenian is mixed in with, Portuguese, whereas I'm like, what are they saying there? And the ones in the Middle East, it's more with Arabic, but we all understand each other more or less. But it's a fascinating thing for me, and when those transformations occur and what happens, it really fascinates me.
For me, when I was watching the play, it's about searching and belonging, and that I understand. Like everybody there understands that. It's like, I understand that this character is searching to see themselves reflected in something bigger. So that for me, it doesn't matter what language you're saying, I understand it.
Yeah.
And speaking about finding other people and finding community, we want to know, how did you start collaborating together? What is your story? Who approached who?
Well, I have to say that I saw Lara first in the first staging of Blood Weddings, directed by Sohail, our dear Sohail Parsa. And so I had this idea to stage piece for Summer Works by Karidasevich, and it was a very complex piece where 4 actors played 16 characters. So I knew I needed really great actors, and I just knew I want her. So I asked Sohail, who was that woman? And so he gave me her contact. So I think in 2015, Summer Works 2015, we staged that piece, and it was a labor of love. We, we didn't have any funding. We just did it for Summer Works. And then she approached me the year after, like, I have this idea, and I could see how excited she was. Like, it sounded like a little girl about this, the life of this ethnic Armenian 19th century actress. And at first I was like, wow, a historical piece. It was just like my first impact was kind of like being a little, I don't know, like, I guess scared, or thinking that wasn't something like usually that I did, right? Because I come, as she said, from performance art and installations and all that. So then, of course, she lured me in, and the more I learned about Siranoush, the more I wanted to work with her. Yeah,
I was reminding Carla about that meeting when we. Because I think we were meeting to wrap up the Summer Works show, and it was a little while later for sure. And then I showed up with I have this little book I have that has excerpts of Siranoush's journals that I found in Armenia, which was really the starting point of the piece. They're not intimate journals; they're more. She talks about the work and her love for being an actor. I was just mesmerized, and I remember showing up to. We were at this cafe at Dundas and Palmerston. It's like, I have this idea, and I pulled out the book. I was like, here she is, and look, there's a picture of her playing Hamlet right there. And I knew at the time I was never interested in doing a biographical, like, and this was Siranoush doing this. Like, that never interested me. But my experience of working with Carla during that Summer Works show was so positive, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a kindred spirit. Like, I get this person, and she gets me. On all the levels, and just artistically, like, it felt very. I had been thinking about this piece for a while, not really knowing the shape of it, and I never really thought, like, I can't do this on my own. I need a collaborator. I'm not a director. I want to write it. And then after working together, I thought, oh no, I think I found the person who can do this. That's our story. That's our meet cute story.
Talking a little bit more about your story and this particular play. This question is for Carla. We know that you are the director and co-creator of the show. How do you balance these two very important roles? How are you able to connect and separate from both of them?
Well, I think that they're very organic, and I don't really see so much a limit or a boundary between those two. Although as the piece progressed, I became more of a director in a more traditional sense, and we started in what could be called here in Anglo-Americas, devising, just such a mechanical word that I actually teach devising, but I try to always talk about, creación colectiva, collective creation or collaborative, creation. So it started with that stimulus, right, of that journal, and it was really about kind of brainstorming from that, learning, researching about Siranoush, and improvising with that, improvising physically and visually with that. And then Lara would go. So our first workshop really was a moment where I felt I'm kind of this, it's her baby, it's her story, it's her debut as a playwright. And so it is great to have someone to bounce off from, especially sometimes you need to detach yourself from that. So in a way, I felt that my role was, if she was the mother, it was her baby. I was the midwife, and I brought this image, this analogy again and again, and so I was there to sort of help to bring this story to life. And then as it developed, and yes, we both knew it was never going to be a historical thing, but I think I kind of, gently just sometimes pushed her a little bit towards making it, oh, this is so much more about Lara, and we kind of had this dance going on because, of course, the importance, you have this responsibility when you're trying to represent someone who lived and it was an important icon in her time, so there is that responsibility to represent, and at the same time it really, because we couldn't find, there is a scene where Lara throws all these papers in the air, say like, we can't find much about her, we know that she was important, and so it became so much more about that search. And I think in a way I kind of helped push in that direction. And then and then also as she worked with playwriting workshops and things like that, it kind of took that direction. But yeah, about my role, I just really see myself as a facilitator, as being there, as mirroring, as a listener, as a reader, and sometimes just like a dramaturg, I guess, asking some questions, saying what I thought I understood, what I thought it was too much. And my preoccupation was, we have this amazing text, and I'm not just saying this because she's here, I think she's so gifted. I'm gonna cry. So this is just, it is the kind of text I want to work with, right? But I was also concerned with like, oh my God, because you sent her home and she came back with lots of writing, and so I started getting that healthy anxiety of like, this is really text heavy, and this is not necessarily how I identify as a director. So how do we find that balance? So for me, it was more about that balance. And I'm very pleased with, where we are right now. I always feel that there's room for greater development, but I really feel that it has sort of landed in a way that I'm very happy with the multiple languages, not just the cultural languages, but the scenic languages and how they were all played a part in telling the story.
And Lara, speaking about this being your playwright debut, why is it important for you to create and write your own work? Because we know you're already a really amazing established actor in TV and film and theater and everywhere where we can see you act. We know.
There's video games too.
But why is that important to create your own work?
The simple answer is I felt compelled to do this. I know that sounds but I just felt like, I was like, I have to tell this story. I think I've always been interested in like collective creation and all that sort of work where the artist has a hand in shaping it. And I love working on new plays, like new play workshops. Oh my God, just so great. I love that. And this one, it just felt like I was compelled to do it. I could not do it. That's what it felt like. And I think I'd always wanted to write, because I directed a little bit more before. And then as this process went on, and it was like Carla would say, I go off and write. Like I come in with, a piece of text and we devise or work on that for now. And then I go back and come back with so much more text. It felt like this was the right path for me. And then I worked with Nightwood's Right from the Hip program and Banff Playwrights Lab, and the piece kept developing. I thought, okay, no, I can do this. I can do this. And it just feels like, who else is going to do it if I'm not going to do it as well? I had not seen this kind of work, and I really wanted to. I thought, as I see in the, say in the play, like, why hadn't I heard of her? But it's also, why hadn't I seen this before? Mm-hmm. Or why hadn't I, experienced this before? Of course, there have been Armenian plays and amazing playwrights, but maybe in the not so much in the diasporic community in this way. And since the piece, I've received so many emails and messages from people saying, I've never seen myself on stage. I've never seen that, and it's very moving to me. At the same time, it really pisses me off. I'm like, why not? Why haven't we seen? Why hasn't this happened? Why did we, why is it such an extraordinary thing? I'd love it to not be so extraordinary in the sense of being able to see ourselves. So I just felt very, very, I was just so curious. And she ticked off all the boxes, Siranoush, and her journey. And I have to say, I was not compelled at all to write about myself at the beginning. Carla really pushed me. And then I have to say, Nightwood Theater, Right from the Hip, there too, all my little cohort there, they like, we want to know more about this. Like, me? What? No. You want to know about Siran? No, we want to know more about you. Same thing at Banff. So going through it was really a process of how do these two stories now speak to each other.
Yeah, we had very emotional responses that I knew how this was important because we also had a reading at the Pomegranate Film Festival early on before Caminos. And I think that was late.
That was late 2017. It was a very, it was like a 15-minute. And the way I wrote this piece is like, literally, it was like 1-page monologue, 2-page monologue, and then just pasting them together in different orders. How does this work? How does this speak to this moment? And how do we work it all around? And the Pomegranate Film Festival happens in Scarborough. It celebrates Armenian film, Armenian filmmakers, Armenian themes in film. And they sometimes had an extra kind of program where it would be music. And in our case, we did a reading. Yeah. And we had an incredible, you're right, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. So, but it was that kind of response sort of, times 100 when, there were audience members coming to me because, Lara has like 20 people waiting to talk to her. And then, people coming to me in tears and thanking me in Portuguese. I'm like, how do you, Portuguese. And so, yeah, we know that, like we and that's something you can only know when you have that, let's just say, that primary audience, right?
Mm-hmm. And it was particularly, I think, a female Armenian voice that had also been missing, because I had, even in 2017, one of the things that struck me the most were these two women who came up to me, and they couldn't speak. They just said, everything you said is, and they just pointed to their abdomen and just started rubbing. They're like, it's in here, and things are moving. Things are moving in here, and I don't know, I have no words to put to them, but things are happening inside of me right now. And it was so incredibly moving to hear that. And they said, you're voicing something that I didn't even know was inside me, but it's inside me, and it's starting to move right now. And that was incredibly gratifying and very moving, very, very moving.
Any sort of like art medium, it makes a difference in terms of like, it reaches like people in an emotional level, and a lot of the time people don't know how to react because they didn't even know that was the emotion they were gonna feel. So I'm sure it's like a very interesting and a lot of time rewarding feeling to know that you connected with so many people, so many strangers.
It really was. And I was a little scared because as Armenians, we don't air dirty laundry in public. That's a thing. Like you don't do that. The community is very, very tight and keeps within itself, and you don't ever show cracks to anyone else. So I was a little worried. I was like, oh, are they gonna, get upset that I'm pointing some things out that might not be as flattering? But the reaction was nothing but exceptionally, oh my gosh, it was just exceptional. It's beyond what I could have hoped for.
I think that's the artist gut feeling. Like when you knew this is the story, and like the journey that this story has had. Like when it finds you, it finds you.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think it was so funny that all the Armenians who came and saw me, the first thing they said after they talked about how much they loved it, are you taking this to LA? Because there's such an enormous Armenian diaspora and community there, including my own family. I have an enormous bunch of family that I spent every summer there as a kid. Even the Armenians who don't know that I have any sort of connection to LA, are you taking this to LA? They need to see it. It was very funny.
Just like Siranoush, you're gonna go touring around the world.
I'm just gonna go around with my little suitcase.
I'm going to activate my LA connections. I lived there for 18 years. That's where my Armenian connection started as well.
Just in this podcast, we're finding out that Siranoush is going
That's
on a
right.
world tour.
You're in LA. It's coming for you. I promise you. No, I do. I have ambitious plans.
We are excited about the ambitious plans. We are coming to an end of our interview, sadly. This has been very fun. But we are going to ask a couple questions that we asked all our guests. Rutas was born out of the desire to bring art from across the Americas to Toronto, to encounter new perspectives, voices, and ideas, and to engage in conversations about art and human rights. What conversations or engagements do you hope Siranoush brought to our audiences?
I think I'm really interested in displacement and looking at what it means to migrate for different reasons and what that means, what that does to a body, what that does to intergenerationally. So thinking about that idea of, I think displacement and human rights and why people leave, forced choice, whatever it is, and how that resonates then not only through their own bodies, but the bodies to come of the generations to come. I think that's always been something that is very at the forefront. As I mentioned in the show, nearly every generation of my family in the last four generations has been born in a different place. And so what does that mean in terms of how we see ourselves, how other species, and I could go on and on. But that idea of displacement, where it lives in the body, and human rights with that, the idea of privileged migration and non-privileged migration, and how those two are conceived of, I would say, in the Western world, and why those conversations.
Yeah, one of the things that fascinated me as the midwife was the ways in which when you are uprooted, right, from your from your culture in different ways, how do we search for, how do we construct this notion of ancestry? And I think that, again, that doesn't necessarily has to do with blood ties, and especially as cultural workers, artists, we are, I think, always looking for, someone in the past that will inspire, not necessarily in the past, but who is able to navigate this, this world where, the ground is always sort of moving in a way. And then so for me it was that. And I don't think I ever told you, Lara, but or maybe I did early on, but for me the analogy was like in my early 20s, and gosh, even into my early 30s, I investigated Carmen Miranda. It was a whole other story, but I always had this sort of, this sort of connection of how, like, I needed to embody Carmen, who was such a rich figure, layered with colonial ties, but also a very authentic drive to be herself, to represent Brazil across the Americas. So anyhow, I don't want to center that conversation at all, but it was a one way that I kind of understood. And for me, so the Lara searching for Siranoush was really something that that story, I think, it awakens and makes us sort of own that desire, right? That desire to search for figures that might show us, not one way, but the many ways through which we can reconnect within and with where we come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, one other conversation that is important to this piece and that Carla and I had a lot about was also just the conversation around female artists who are mothers, or any, like in my particular, it's female artist, the mother. What does that mean? And what does that mean both to your creative force and to your family, and navigating that? So that was a big part of this piece as well.
Yeah.
That conversation.
How do you do it all, right?
My gosh, the question that sets you up to fail.
So speaking of failure, we have a question about that for you next. So every episode, we ask our current guest to pose a question to the next guest so we can keep the conversation going across practices and across borders. The question we have for both of you comes from Santiago Guzman, the writer and performer of Altar. And Santiago's question is, how have you failed in your artistic process? And what has that taught you?
Oh my gosh, you have to fail. So when I teach, the first day that I walk into and let me be straight, like it doesn't feel so good all the time. But I think failure is showing that you're trying to figure something out. And if you're not trying to figure something out, and it's impossible for everything to go as planned, because then why would you rehearse or do anything? Like then the piece is already created. So it taught me to rely on instinct, to keep, even when it wasn't working. It's like, I know there is something there. That would happen with Carla. It's like, I know, Carla, I know it's not working. Just give me time. Like, I know it's there. I haven't quite formulated yet. I don't know what it is, but me wanting to go back to it was a sign that something is there that needs to be uncovered. So I think it's a valuable tool. It's a tool. Oh my gosh, like any other tool, it teaches you so much, and it is as important as those moments that we land. I think the other side, I think it's crucial, because then that's the only thing that's going to tell you whether something belongs in a piece or not, or your curiosity is being satisfied or not.
Yeah, and just to expand or from that is, there was a moment where I felt, okay, now we're presenting, right? Now, so we're process. Now we have to have this product, right? And I think the moments that I decided to play safer were the moments that didn't quite work. So, I mean, you guys saw the scene where we throw eggs at this wall, right? And at Caminos, we had more of a video representation of that, but we really wanted to have that contact with the material, that messiness, that, realness kind of thing, and in a participatory way. So I think it was our last show where I didn't, because the first one, someone had thrown the egg in a way that it spilled onto Trevor's big scrim, and I just panicked, like, how much is that? How am I going to pay for that? And so all these thoughts, like every night, I mean, it was only 3 nights, but like, that tension. So then the last time I thought, we need a plant. We're going to put someone there to throw the egg and not miss it, so that, so we don't have all this cost. But it didn't feel the same way. It kind of felt like it took the risk out. So again, because we have to risk, we have to continue to just push our boundaries. And sometimes because of these, presenting conditions and material limitations, sometimes you may just kind of shrink back from that risk, and then just learn that you shouldn't. Anyhow, you should do it and figure it out later, but don't compromise that choice.
Yeah, thank you. So what would you two like to ask to our next guest?
Well, I'm I'm curious as to how the piece that has been shared at Rutas might influence their future creations, or whether this piece is a seed for a bigger project. So I'm always curious about that.
My question might feed into that, but just because we were talking about risk, which is what is the artistic risk that most excites and terrifies you right now?
Ooh, I
Good
love that.
questions.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you so much for bringing art into our lives. And we can't wait to see where Siranoush goes next. Maybe LA, maybe, we don't know.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great hearing your feedback as well. Thank you so much.
We're speaking from Tacoronto. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is covered by the Diju Spoon Wampum and Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase.
At Aluna, we remember that people can begin to heal when they are hurt. We are committed to artful participation in disagreements. We are committed to unsettling ourselves towards connection, respect, and justice for all people who now live in this city, which has been a meeting place since time immemorial.
Radio Luna Teatro is supported by Aluna Theatre with support from the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Department of Canadian Heritage, and TD Bank.
Aluna Theater is Beatriz Pisano and Trevor Shelness.
Radio Luna Teatro is produced by Mónica Garrido y Lucía Linares.
For more about Aluna Theater, visit us at alunatheater.ca, follow at Aluna Theater on Twitter or Instagram, or like us on Facebook.